You will take responsibility for your actions.
Wow, Uncle Scrooge! Saving my life and—
You will not talk your way out of this. You are going to own your mistakes and apologise.
I said in my other DuckTales essays that Season 1 was about the importance of family bonds, Season 2 centered around the origins and consequences of greed, and for this final season, I want to discuss how the characters accept defeat in order to succeed. But I point out to myself every time I write, record, and even edit this video what an obvious statement that is, because, well, all three of these themes have been prevalent throughout the entire show, so I asked myself a couple times, why even bother make this video? And the answer is, the more I thought about each character's arc, the more I realized that learning to take responsibility and accept defeat was what made the family bonds so strong between everyone. It was what snapped them out of their more greedy behavior. After all, as the theme song does say, the worst of messes become successes. And as I looked back on my favorite characters, I found some pretty repetitive traits as to how each of them started off unable to accept defeat, what motivated them to take the next step forward to prove themselves, and ultimately, how they've each become strong, independent, and just all around happy with their lives and the people in them. So with that said, let's get dangerous one last time. Now, it's really easy to blame the adults for isolating themselves and their kids because, well, yeah, it is their fault. Sure, Beakley and Donald already experienced everything that could go wrong and just want a more secure, peaceful life for their kids, and it's clear as day that they do it out of genuine care. But if they let their kids out in the world sooner, they would have learned about life a lot quicker, and the two of them would have learned how to become better parents. Now, that's not to say the kids learned nothing positive from these experiences. Since the boys only had each other as peers and agreed that Donald was always too hard on them, but had no one else to help rebel against them, they were much more open and enthusiastic about working together as a team because at that point, it was a necessity, so it didn't matter who was in charge of the schemes as long as they were able to get out in the open. Now that they are and are more accustomed to having friends outside of the family to help them, once they're in a position where they inevitably have to go back to their old ways, well, just look at them.
Uncle Scrooge says I'm a favorite! What?
Yeah, my thoughts exactly. As lonely as it is to do nothing but study all by yourself for over a decade, Webby and Violet clearly didn't get the amount of knowledge they have in a class of kids their age, being raised by or among people who could teach them an advanced set of skills at an early age, ranging from world history, different languages, to just about every single woodchuck, martial art, or espionage technique imaginable so that when they inevitably had to fend for themselves, they'd be ready for anything. It's true that excluding themselves or being excluded from other kids their age was a missed opportunity to make friends sooner rather than later, but at the same time, in Violet's case, being solitary from other kids prevented anything from distracting her in her studies, making her much more disciplined and focused than your average kid, and I think completing her woodchuck training on her own is what made her less worried about competition with others and more concerned in completing her tasks, which would certainly explain why she's always so humble. Of course, Webby didn't have the fortune of being as out and about like Violet, but I would argue that's what motivated her to do so much research on as many real-life topics and learn as many languages as she possibly could. That way, once she was finally allowed outside, she could at least attempt to find common ground with just about anyone about anything. And she's rewarded for her hard work and patience.
Here! That was actually pretty cool.
Then there are the ones who are most known for past or present day mistakes, making it figuratively or literally impossible for them to reach out to others until they're introduced to or reminded of someone they begin to feel responsible for. And it's the amount of time spent with or away from them that makes them realize how important they are to their lives, to the point where they become much more motivated than ever to return and reconcile their relationships with them. A mission they can't accomplish on their own, obviously, given the circumstances, so they have to ask for help from people who are new to them but are more than willing to help, and in the process, making as many new friends as they are regaining old ones. But since cooping up kids is still a pretty dumb idea, since the majority of the kids started off being watched like hawks, they had few opportunities to make decisions for themselves without interference, So they tried harder than ever to rebel against their guardians in ways that got them into deeper trouble as time went by. And since Donald, Beakley, and Magica didn't have other adults to share the responsibility or to call them out, they got away with coddling the kids, leading to much more fear or resentment from them. Beakley especially is willing to reveal her personal life as a secret agent to Webby so she understands where the martial arts and spy skills come from. But much like Donald refusing to discuss Della, she didn't tell the truth about her own origins, only looking back on them with grief without giving any details, making it clear that she hadn't let go of the possibility that Webby could have been used for evil.
She's my granddaughter. I'll determine what's best for her.
But she still raised her with this positive outlook towards life that makes Webby a much more emotionally strong person than Beakley, and that's all she wants for her grandchild. But the fact that she didn't truly believe her own teachings definitely has strained the amount of trust between the two of them. But I mean, at least the boys had each other to grow up alongside and still gain social skills in isolation so that they can apply those skills in making friends in the future. Webby, Lena, and Violet were all initially only children raised by adults who either didn't understand kids their age or misunderstood themselves, resulting in antisocial personality traits, a complete lack of social skills, or a highly technical vocabulary that admittedly makes it harder for kids their age to connect with them. Violet does have the slight advantage of being raised by more than one adult figure and is probably used to any rejection that comes from being raised by them, so she has the clearest concept of the world and the best social skills, but sometimes that's the only thing people see her as, the best. We never really see Vi's flaws out in the open, but her advanced knowledge and achievements are always as crystal clear as possible. So, when her other friends make it explicitly clear how jealous they are of her, she has to stop what she's doing to admit her flaws in order to show that her perfect persona is separate from her actual self, reassuring her friends that they're not insignificant and that, like them, she's only
A human being!
Let's just move on to the next theme.
We sweep counterclockwise.
No! Oh, sorry, I was taking a Hughes. That's a snooze I take while Huey explains boring nerd stuff. Trademark Louie Duck.
I was trying to figure out why the boys are more interested in solving problems separately than in the past, but for a while I thought it was just because now that they have friends and other family members to bounce off of, they don't need to team up anymore, and sometimes that is true. But then it occurred to me that Huey always had the advantage of being in the woodchucks, so he got to learn important life lessons, strict attention to detail, and planning for adventures from other adult figures. Dewey, Louie, and when he teams up with her Webby, only had their original guardian. If they didn't learn something from them, they learned it on their own, so they often resent Huey immediately taking charge of the situation and drift apart to take charge of their own actions based on their experiences. And usually when Dewey and Louie specifically rebel against him, they end up digging themselves a bigger hole than before, because as good at improvising as they are, some adventures do need at least a little preparation, and they each have to have work ethic to begin with in order to prepare for things. So they're forced to admit their brother was right, but as opposed to being humble about it, Huey always takes these victories as a sign that his training is infallible, continues to boss his brothers around in what basically becomes a never-ending cycle. With Webby, one of the best things Beakley taught her to live by and one of her best character qualities is the strict moral compass that clearly differentiates right from wrong, but not without hope that people can mend their ways in the future. She's more willing to tolerate, work alongside, and forgive those who have done her wrong, and it's such an endearing quality to have. But since some of her new friends have more ambiguous morals than her, she won't be afraid of being critical in a constructive way in the hopes that they'll mend their ways, and sometimes, yeah, that does work. Unfortunately, no matter how many times she's proven right, she'll either come across someone else who hasn't figured this out, or her friends will forget the lessons she taught them based on the pain that comes with being wrong. So much like Huey's case, it's a never-ending cycle for her. And speaking of Webby, as much as Beakley training her in martial arts has definitely taught her a lot of great things and has serviced herself and the boys, since Beakley was the only opponent Webby ever had, and her other opponents not only know where she lives, but have different fighting styles and abilities, now that Webby's more out in the open, she often faces more difficulty in certain fights and still gets captured frequently. Hell, at sleepovers, she has to sleep with a battle axe. In other words, Beakley's wish for her to be safe, unfortunately, was never going to be fulfilled even if Fowl hadn't existed. And obviously, she wouldn't have had a grandkid if Fowl didn't exist either. She and Donald once in a while accept this by trusting Scrooge and Della enough with the kids based on the success of their first adventures, and they don't protest them going on high-risk journeys. But since they exclude themselves from their trips, they tend to forget the amount of anxiety it gives them, so in the rare times they join and finally have the opportunity to be in charge of an adventure, they follow the same self-righteous leader position the kids have developed, but they also see the amount of danger the adults put everyone in, while denying the fact that the danger is just as much at home as it is anywhere else and takes charge of them too.
You've been able to wish us out this whole time.
Come on, it's not so bad here, is it? Silly problems, comforting music, and everything gets resolved nicely in the end with no one getting hurt, or captured, or lost.
As for the outsiders, isolation may have motivated them to be much more enduring and motivated to come back to their loved ones, but they've had so much time to reflect on the mistakes they've made to the point of growing this intense amount of self-loathing that they've vent out on their replacements, or the very few people that they have left.
No way, buddy! I know I was gone for a while, but I will not be replaced!
Spy! A thief! A second-rate knockoff of me! Get away from Webby! She's mine!
They could just as easily tell their friends and guardians how they're feeling for them to understand what they're going through and be more of assistance to helping them reconcile the past, but because of how hard it is to admit painful memories and this underlying fear that if they reveal the misdeeds in their past, their loved ones may distance themselves yet again, this fear is what encourages them to continue to keep secrets that make it harder for them to move on. But no matter how often they try to deny it, they need someone to confide in, to provide guidance that can help them face their inner demons.
Take it from someone who used to be Magicka's shadow. You can't ignore the parts of yourself you don't like, even the parts you're afraid of. You gotta own them.
Before I get into the kids and the parents, I want to start off with Launchpad because while I've always liked him, based on his, talented flying, I could never figure out what lessons we were supposed to learn from him. But I mean, what makes him a likable character is that he's always eager to offer help to others, but his lack of intelligence in a given situation can lead his friends to voice disapproval of him in a more constructive way than they would with anyone else. It's their way of showing they at least understand his thought process and appreciate his effort, but even he can sense their disappointment and feels insignificant either way. But whenever a loved one is in danger, specifically someone who also shares the feeling that they're a failure in their family and or their career, all he can concentrate on is rescuing them. Whether he has high intelligence or not, he becomes more motivated and focused than ever before, and succeeds in rescuing his friends and confirming they respect him, but also becoming an inspiration towards them, considering his perseverance makes up much more for a lack of intelligence.
I'm not a hero.
That's ridiculous! You helped inspire me to be a hero! And me, pal.
Same here.
And I as well, Earth Launchpad.
Now, on to the rest of the family. Huey's past experiences of his woodchuck training proving successful and proving his brothers wrong makes it harder for him to see someone his age excel at something better than him. He tries even harder to prove his way is the only way, and just like his brothers, he only gets more frustrated with himself and with the ones he's competing with. Thankfully, the ones proving him wrong know that getting upset with him would only make things harder and longer to solve, so they provide a detailed explanation of how the only reason their way works for them is based on the mistakes they've made in their past. It's great to see him take their advice and not only accept his faults, but embrace them, succeeding at their goal and earning his friends' respect.
That was the most beautiful butt-kicking I've ever seen. I'll cherish this day.
Dewey's so used to his ideas being ignored or rejected by his brothers, since Huey's more interested in the pursuit of knowledge and Louie's sole purpose is to make a profit. He feels he has no choice to operate on his own, but his goal is often to be seen as simply popular and talented at anything without even practicing, as opposed to his brothers being talented based on knowledge and persistence. So people tend to see through his need for attention and tend to offer an alternative solution, but he's too embarrassed by his failure to accept it and continues doing things his way, still failing at it and even leading his friends and family into danger. But again, just like Launchpad, whenever someone he loves is in danger, he gets back on his feet, and when he focuses on saving them by remembering the advice they tried to pass on to him, his actions save the day. But he knows he wouldn't have been able to do so on his own and acknowledges the impact his family's input has had on him. And weirdly enough, he can actually use that advice to be a sort of mentor figure to others. Yeah, never thought I'd say that either. To people like Webby, Launchpad, and Goslin, people who grew up an only child without peers their age to support them and automatically share his feeling of supposed loneliness, But whenever they're the ones in a pickle, he shares his own experiences where they felt the same way they do, and that's really where they find common ground. As for Louis, he's so used to his family interfering with his cons, whether it's based on differing ideas or just complete disapproval of his life of crime, which is why he maintains his position as the sole decision maker at all times, especially when he has to rely on his family's help. Therefore, whenever anything goes according to plan, he can confidently say it was because he told them so. But his one major flaw as a con man, which I actually never noticed before, is he doesn't really personally know the strengths and weaknesses of his marks, which is usually why his plans still fail even when they go according to plan. Without any other options, he reluctantly has to allow a partner he's never shared equal credit with to take over. But the partner, instead of lying their ass off like him, improvises a strategy by simply being truthful, forcing Louis to admit he was wrong and welcome further input from them in other schemes. Vi has such a deep passion for knowledge, and with the chance to see the world alongside her new friends, she would clearly much rather be the one learning from others as opposed to being the one teaching. But with every adventure she goes on, there's always someone who needs encouragement or assistance that makes her one of, if not the only ones who can help them out. So she takes charge of the situation, but does so in her own way that earns the respect of the ones who were previously jealous of her. Her greatest strength is her advanced knowledge, but as opposed to trying to learn new things nonstop, she instead takes the time to share what she's learned in order to benefit others. It's arguably what makes her one of the show's most formidable teachers. Webby, on the other hand, grew up the most isolated of the kids and gets excited at the simplest or most dangerous things in life because she gets to finally explore a world she's been devoid of. Her more sociable friends only see the danger involved and quietly question her lack of experience, but some of them will go on an adventure that they themselves have no experience in, and they inevitably fail, which is why bystanders, friends, and family of theirs will judge them based on first impressions alone and make them feel like a complete outsider or failure with supposedly no one to confide in.
For most of my life, I stayed in the mansion and studied. I was Webby, expert on all things McDuck. But then I left, got out into the world, and the world was big. I didn't really fit in or even know where to start. Sometimes I wished I could go back to the mansion where I knew exactly who I was. But the guys, my family, showed me new and amazing and wonderful things. I'm still Mansion Webby, but I'm also World Explorer Webby.
When she sees someone in need of assistance in adjusting to life, she wants to share the things she's learned and show the same level of patience and support everyone gave her. And her willingness to help is why they apply her advice on what to do. So when it finally works, they're genuinely grateful and loyal to her. When it comes to settling disputes with the family, Webby's only had Beakley to argue with as a family member, so whenever she sees the McDucks quarreling with each other, she's not blinded by the emotions behind it and instantly sees how pointless it is, trying to defuse the situation by reminding them of their successes together. Which does lead to further arguments over who's responsible for the success, but she does remind them of the influence they all had on her, bringing them to their senses and making peace at just the right time. And it's no secret that what makes Lena my favorite character is her constant struggle to rid herself of Magica as her only family. So having been accepted into the McDuck circle and even get adopted by the Saberwings has definitely taught her more life lessons than Magica ever did, and has also given her this newfound sense of joy and optimism. But ask yourself this: if Magica was never a part of her life, would she ever have met the friends who helped her shape who she is as a person? Would she have ever found a stable family that loves her regardless of her flaws? Would she ever have powers that could be used for good the ways that she does now? And if so, who else could teach Lena how to control them? I know how awkward these questions are, considering the abusive nature that makes this one of, if not the most fucked up Disney parent-child relationships ever, which is really saying something, but in all seriousness, for all the misdeeds Lena subjected herself to in Magica's service, they've brought opportunities for her to grow as a person. It was just up to her to summon up the courage to listen to her loved ones and stand up to Magica in order to escape. No matter how many times it seemed pointless, in the end, she never gave up. And as she points out, the irony in asking Magica to teach her how to use her powers, and Magica having fun tormenting her as always, is that Magica revealed the very strengths and weaknesses of her own sorcery. Things that Lena can finally use to emotionally and physically defend herself from others and from her. How many of you can safely say you've done that in your lives? Now as for the adults, Beakley may be Scrooge's employee, but she has the rare quality of having worked alongside him as equal partners and as her employee before he became the family man he is now. She's probably the one who understands him the most, especially when it comes to how he feels towards his family and knows exactly what to say when offering tough love advice or wisdom onto him. But this confidant role gives her the impression that she's intellectually and emotionally smarter than everybody else, even though she's never shared anything about herself. Because of this, other family members have to pressure her the same way she does to them whenever she becomes too superior than thou. And while this may make her seem like a hypocrite, and in some ways she definitely is, I mean, what character on the show isn't, when she does confront them on their mistakes, she always tells the truth. Her role as advisor is always out of genuine care. But when she's the one in question, she's always shocked and confused that anyone would, becoming more aggressive, showing how little she questions her own beliefs, but they know from experience that's what it takes to admit your flaws, so they persist until she finally does. But here's the thing. Many of them have learned to take criticism from her and how not to judge others solely on their mistakes from her.
Well, you've successfully pushed your family and everyone who cared about you away. Again. I hope you're happy.
I made the mistake of keeping a secret from my family once, and it almost tore us apart. This family can handle the truth, Bentina, whatever it is.
Remaining completely confident of her strengths, but also admitting her weaknesses. It doesn't guarantee that she won't repeat herself in the future, but I mean, literally every person does, and I'll get to that in the conclusion. As for Donald, now that he no longer has to be the sole provider for the boys, Della can finally make up for lost time and be the role model she was supposed to be to begin with. And he can devote himself to more time to passions he initially had before, like playing music with the Three Caballeros or establishing a relationship with Daisy. But when he can't get gigs on his own, Donald has no choice but to accept help from his nephews in order to get them, inadvertently proving that their resourcefulness that he ignored for the longest time. But not without proving they still need at least a little bit of his protection, and that his coddling nature in the past was out of genuine care.
I don't want to be defined by the mistakes I made, but rather by the humility of admitting them. So, to all of you, I'm sorry.
Jason Reitman once said that we live in a culture that revolves around shame. If you experience shame, you're instantly out of the race, but if you don't, not only do you succeed, but you thrive from it. No matter how hard we try to deny it, we've all made mistakes. We've all done something that we are, to this day, completely ashamed of. Mistakes that may have even had the best of intentions in mind for not just yourself, everyone around you, and yet people would still disapprove because that's not the way that they would handle the situation themselves. One of, if not the best lessons that kids and adults could take away from the show, hopefully, is that the most we can do about this is learn from our mistakes. Forgive ourselves for making them. Forgive your friends and family for causing any harm, intentional or not, whether it be for better or worse. And weirdly enough, keep on making mistakes so you can learn more about yourself and others can learn about you and attempt to find some common ground. Even in episodes that completely sucked, like Astro Boy or They Put a Moonlander on Earth, were still watchable because of these lessons. They were the reason I kept smiling and, in some cases, even tearing up for such lovable, amazing characters that I really hope we see more of in the future. So, thank you so much to Frank Angones, I have no idea how to pronounce that, I apologize. And thank you to Matt Youngberg, you guys as showrunners, your animators, your storyboard artists, your writers, your directors, your actors especially. They all did a hell of a job. Thank you to the Disney execs who, for whatever reason, did let these guys do whatever the fuck they wanted because it was more than worth it. It was one of the best things Disney has ever created in a long, long time. And thank you guys so much for watching. It's been a lot of fun making these videos over the past few years. I look forward to making more videos like this about other movies and TV shows, so be sure to stay tuned, be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below what movies and shows you'd like me to see essays done. I can't guarantee I will, but I'll definitely give them some thought. And once again, thank you all so much for watching. Take care.